So, the first thing I want to ask is, what are your burning questions? What are the things you're most confused about in the process or that you want to know the most out of this day? Anybody have any questions? Yes? Well, it's not a trick, but there are many things, many variables that are going to affect your cost. So what you want to do is you want to work with an agency, regardless of who it is, that at each decision-making point, they say, this is going to have a range of cost. You hire this clinic for a single IVF donor cycle, it's $30,000. You hire this clinic for a guaranteed baby, it's $45,000. Here are the pros and cons. Here are the likelihoods. What do you choose? Now, when you come to matching with a surrogate, everybody wants to know, how long is it going to take me to match with a surrogate? Because they think that somehow determines how long it's going to take. It doesn't, because being matched with a surrogate in 4 months, 6 months, 12 months may affect the front end, but it doesn't predict failed transfers. It doesn't predict miscarriages. It doesn't predict the surrogate's lining not thickening and you having to be matched with another surrogate. Surrogacy is not a straight line. Surrogacy is a wavy line. And what that means is, what you want to do is work with someone with the experience that'll get you on the line as fast as possible again, and will stay with you without increasing costs on their end, so that they don't have rematching fees. They don't have additional administration fees. They say, when you pay us our agency fee, that's it. You will never pay us another dollar. We're not going to nickel and dime you. If you're an international parent, we're not going to add anything. If you have another surrogate, we're not going to charge you another $5,000. When it comes to those kinds of choices, when you come to your surrogate, remember this: the cost of your surrogate is not just her fee. As you all know, U.S. insurance has deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums. And you are going to be responsible for the medical costs of this process all the way up to your surrogate's out-of-pocket maximum. And I'll bet everyone in this room with their insurance has a different out-of-pocket maximum. Some are $2,000, some are $20,000. Your surrogates are going to have that same variety. Surrogates are going to come in 3 clumps. We have insurance that in the policy, it's very clear it's going to cover our maternity, and we've had it for 10 years through my job. That is not your expense any more than their mortgage, their car payment, their grocery bill. So when you hire a surrogate like that, you shouldn't be responsible for the monthly expense of her insurance. It will reduce your cost. But she may have the $20,000 out of pocket as opposed to the $2,000. So it's not just that. In the middle, there's another group that have plans that talk about surrogacy exclusions, but because of the way they're written or where they appear in the policy, it's not clear whether it's intended to cover her hiring a surrogate or her maternity as a surrogate. Those are called ambiguous plans, and the law generally says we're going to construe those against the insurance company that wrote them and enforce payment. But they're a little more insecure. There's a difference between group plans and self-insured plans. So you want to make sure that if it's an iffy situation, you buy a backup plan, which adds several $1,000s to your cost. But again, in that group, you don't have to pay the monthly premiums. The third are surrogates that clearly don't have coverage. Then you're going to have to buy a plan. You either buy it through Lloyd's of London, Allianz, the Affordable Care Act, and now you're paying monthly premiums on top of out-of-pocket maximums. So what you need to do is work with an insurance company that understands all the elements that affect your cost, and they aren't tricks, they're just different piles of options that you get to pick. So when you say, I want to match with a surrogate, you're going to say single versus married, first time versus experienced, low fee versus high fee, existing insurance versus I'll pay. It depends on your economic circumstances, and it depends on your desire to go fast. Because every requirement you put on the surrogacy pool reduces the number of candidates available to match with you and increases the timeline for matching. that make sense? Did I do good? Okay. Any other questions? Oh, come on. Oh, yes. 27. I'm old. All right. First of all, I'm a lawyer. I don't have patience. Yep. Ask my ex-wife. None. Yeah. I'll give you her number. In any event, the 3 things I wish you guys knew going into the process. That's a great question. It's a question I've never had and I've never thought about, so I'm going to ad lib on this one if that's okay. The first thing is, I want you to understand exactly what I talked about in the beginning. Surrogacy is not a straight line. Surrogacy is a place where in a dozen different places you can waver off the line. And I want you to have that expectation going in. And if you have that expectation, I want you to understand that if you stay dedicated to the process and you work with professionals that are equally dedicated to your process as you are, you will be successful. That's thing number 1. The second thing I wish everybody coming into the process knew is that there are ways to control your cost. There are 6 or 7 decision-making points. Which clinic do I use? Do I do a guaranteed baby program? Do I do genetic testing? Some doctors say yes, some say no. That'll add $7,000. Choosing your surrogate. That's geography. West Coast surrogates generally have higher fees. Midwest surrogates have lower fees. East Coast surrogates somewhere in between. So geography matters in where you select your surrogate. It doesn't matter where your agency is, because I'm a Minnesota agency, so 90% of my surrogates come from Minnesota and Wisconsin, where we have good breeding stock of great character. And the fees are $28 to $35. In California, I think you can reasonably think around 40, and it might go up from there depending. But a California agency can recruit a surrogate in Minnesota or Nevada or other places, and they can also have lower cost surrogates. So it's important for you to know that the placement of your agency doesn't necessarily tie you into where your surrogate is, but where your surrogate is may affect your cost. So make sure you talk to your agency about that. The third thing from a legal perspective, and this has nothing to do with agency, is it doesn't matter if it's a pre-birth state or a post-birth state. Pre-birth states are generally hawked by the people or agencies that are there saying, your parentage is guaranteed. That's a fib. The latest litigation that went all the way up to our U.S. Supreme Court was a surrogate in California that had triplets for a deaf man in Virginia or wherever he lived, who lived in his parents' basement. She got pregnant with triplets. He said, I need you to selectively reduce, and the contract says you have to. And she said, I'm not gonna. He tried to force her, she tried to keep the kids, they litigated for 2 years. So a pre-birth state doesn't stop your surrogate from trying to change her mind. The question is, will she and can she? The answer to will is kind of set out in a study they did in 2002. Yes, I know that's kind of old. But they looked at 15,000 surrogacies, and how many surrogacies had conflict between the surrogate and the parents? Anybody want to guess? Huh? 89, less than 0.5%. Out of that 89, 27 were surrogates that wavered. 62 were parents that didn't want the kids. It had a disability, they got divorced, they went bankrupt. In some societies, they were the wrong gender. Parents are twice as unreliable as surrogates. Your surrogate is not the issue, you are. The surrogates that we recruit ask the polar opposite of the question you ask. You come in and say, what am I going to do if she wants to keep my baby? Surrogates all say, what am I going to do if they don't take the kid? I don't want it. So you don't have to worry about that. In a pre or a post-birth state, the difference is the surrogate's still the parent upon birth, and the issue is whether you have decision-making authority. And you can put legal documents in place short of a parentage proceeding, guardianship documents that transfer all parental authority. So from birth to the time you go to the post-birth court hearing, you're still parents for all purposes. And the court hearings are set up so the first and only birth record that's ever printed is still the one that you're on. So practically speaking, there's no difference. And to further reassure you, and this goes to your issue, the case law all around the country is as long as you use a surrogate who is not the egg donor, there's no case anywhere except one aberrant case in New Jersey, which has since changed its law, that says the surrogate will keep any parental rights. So A, it doesn't prevent litigation. B, litigation is highly unlikely. And even if they litigate, they'll lose. So there's no difference in those two situations, and the practical effect of parental authority and birth records is the same in both. So don't get distracted by the shiny object of a pre-birth order. It's not critical. Helpful? Yes? Libel and slander. All right, well, I'll say the facts. There's an entity not unlike men having babies called Family Through Surrogacy who has stopped inviting Canadian providers because of the unreliability of their donors and surrogates. They won't even work with them anymore. Surrogacy is illegal in Canada by national legislation that applies in all the provinces. It's a crime to recruit and match surrogates. It's a crime, it's a felony to pay a surrogate compensation for doing it. So unless you're finding your own surrogate and not paying them, going to Canada expressly violates the law, which the government is not enforcing. And the agencies are using semantics to get around that by saying, wait a minute, you're not paying us to recruit and match. That's free. You're paying us to administer after you get your surrogate. Well, how do you like that distinction? And then they say, the only way you're not paying your surrogate compensation is if you're only paying her for her meds, her mileage to the clinic, any direct medical expenses she might have, but you can't pay her mortgage, you can't pay her car payment, you can't pay her groceries, because that's enhancement of her income. So even if they characterize it in that way, you're still paying her. And that's your crime. And if you're in Canada, at some point in time and something goes wrong and they start enforcing the law, you are breaking it. So the question isn't whether you can do it in Canada, you can. They have found a way around the law. But it's a way around the law, and the law still prohibits. How many of you, if you go to Canada, think your agency is going to recruit and match a surrogate for you? Oh, come on. Yeah, you assume they're going to do that. So it's your choice.